Chris, do you want to perhaps just start by giving us a bit of context as to what your relationship is with Brighton and Hove Council and what it is that you're doing there and how that kind of works?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I work as a procurement consultant, have been as an interim for about 8 years prior to starting Advice Cloud. So I worked on and off with Brighton for about 3 or 4 years, providing a whole range of procurement consultancy services, mostly within the IT space, but also in social care and housing and property.
And Brighton and Hove Council, what have they done with G-Cloud?
We've been using G-Cloud since August 2012. Firstly, I bought customer relationship management software. So that's Lot 3 SaaS. We've bought a very large, by our standards, infrastructure for service, which we're in progress. We're going through at the moment. So that's a consolidation of 3 data centers. I've bought numerous amounts of consultancy, use it for pre-market engagement. I think we've even bought some platform as a service for our web hosting as well. So we bought all 4 lots, actually.
Okay. So, John, you guys obviously sell into the local government sector. Why is it so slow? Why has it not been, have we not seen the adoption rates that we have at central government level? Is it just the cloud first mandate that's...
The local government have bought from SMEs for years, I'll say that. I think the cloud first and the SME agenda in central government is focus in minds. We certainly get contacted because of that. Local government, I think also it's a little bit more fragmented. And, I've been to the soccer team events, and when you talk to people, there's still an issue about outsource and job protection. There's cultural issues there, whether it's in IT outsourcing internal to the organisation or people trying to work out whether or not the cloud is secure enough. We've seen the pressures to use PSN and all the various things that have been reported. So I think the fit for purpose is an issue still for some local authority buyers.
Is there that still that kind of not invented here syndrome as well? Is that, for some reason the way that we do our payroll is completely different to the way the next county does it, or the next county does it, or the next county does it?
Yes, I believe so, and it's interesting when you read the Labour policy review and people start talking about, is there a need for the GDS for the local government for reuse of components? I have attended lots of presentations by local authority users building cloud, and there's different models. Some are buying IIS but putting open source technologies on there and then layering on top of that all the services they need. Whether or not that's the most economic model is another argument, but that's certainly one model we're seeing. So they're buying the component technologies or use them as open source to rebuild applications.
Well, I mean, you just mentioned this whole idea of local GDS. That's something which Socratim seems to be slightly shifting its stance on now. It was fairly firmly set against it to begin with. It seems to be saying, well, it might work, but rather grudgingly. What's the objection? Is there a legitimate objection to the idea of a local GDS?
I don't think there is, but I think it certainly would dilute the message and the work that GDS are doing. That's a very personal view. That's certainly not Brighton Hove City Council's view.
Sure.
But I think that if you start getting that, you will find the fragmentation, and it will then become a regional local GDS, and then probably a district and borough local GDS, and maybe even coming down even tighter than that, lower than that. So I don't think you'll see I hope you won't see personally a local GDS.
John, would it be helpful from your perspective?
Well, it's win all or win none potential. There's always a threat there. It depends on the self-build mentality. We've heard a very good presentation just now about commodity services. It's where they fit within that wider infrastructure. Interesting enough, I listened, I think it was Hounslow's position. They're looking to rebuild applications and then resell them if they can to other local authorities. Well, every local authority is going to want to do that to maintain its own resource base to maintain those products. And I think we heard earlier this morning from Carol about sustainability. That is a big issue about the self-build versus commodity and what you're trying to actually do. So that, we all have this conflict of interest from the point of view of what is the most economic way to deploy technology in the public sector.
So from Brighton and Hove's perspective, what have been the main drivers to adoption of cloud tech?
Well, I think one of the things that I always find from suppliers when they're knocking at my door is I get a lot of we've got this great stuff, yeah, or what are you doing with this? No one actually comes to me and says, something. We know that you've got to save 25% of your budget over the next per year over the next 4 years. And it's the areas that you really haven't tackled so far, because we've looked into your website and looked into what stuff you've done, is the fact that you've got to look at children's services. We've got a mobile app here that reduced children's services processing time by 3 days per week. That will save you X amount of FTE and forward that up. I have very, very few suppliers that come to me and say that sort of stuff. And that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear that you've got some IaaS that I could buy, or a bit of desktop as a service or anything like that. I've got that. Thanks very much.
Well, this was one of the messages that Sarah from CCS came up this morning, and came up with the line along the lines of suppliers don't necessarily approach the buyers in the correct way in the local government.
Yeah.
What are you doing wrong?
Actually, most suppliers that ever sold to the public sector in the old days, the one, and I'll be careful what I say here, the best way to influence a win is to influence the tender, which is actually influencing the requirements. And one of the things you can do now, which actually people were sticky about in the past, was what they call pre-market engagement, which is trying to educate the user. So we now get the informed buyer. We never had that before, because we've all picked up tenders and said they don't know what they're asking for. So that was always a big issue. So the best thing you can do, which is the point here, is if you can give someone the ROI, the business case that they can append, they can say, right, this is what it's going to do for us, because they're not going to sit there and do all the calculations. The more case studies and ROI benefits that you can actually prove, that if you can save someone £2 million a year and your system costs £500,000, it's a no-brainer. They've all got to make cuts at the moment.
So you mentioned use case again there, and this is one of the things again that we talked about this morning about whether there are enough of these positive stories that are filtering down into local government circles and right across the public sector. Where does the responsibility for those use cases come from? Is it coming from the supplier side of things, or do we need more coming out of G-Cloud itself, out of the program?
Well, we've tried our best to provide use case. We blog, we provide articles. I think in the early days we did a couple for local authority on both Havant and Devon County Council. Gave some examples. It was interesting, actually. Devon County Council, they were trying to work on some pension schemes with Somerset County Council, and so needed to just share some information. And so they went to their IT department and they said, what can we do for this? Do you have anything? And the IT department says, I'll go to the cloud store, or as it was called in those days. And so they went off and they found several suppliers. Now, the only ones they picked were ones that properly described their service and had free trials, because they said to the users, right, these are the ones we would suggest based on security or whatever. Go and try it, the end user. There was no sales interaction. We had a call, just clarified some points. Within first trial to signing contract was 4 days. They bought 47 users on the Monday. That was on the Friday. On the Monday, we said, right, set up your workspace. We'll just have a quick look at it, make sure you go in the right direction. I've never met that client. They used it for a year, finished the project, closed it down, still not met them. But they grew to about 75 users. It was about £3,800, I think. Wasn't a huge amount. The cost of sale was taken out of the equation. So it did open up a new dynamic for us. I think one of the areas you'll see a lot more of in local government is shared services. You talked about the back office and anything special. I think what you're seeing, and I heard from Joe Kress again last week, that the government is looking at the multi-agency platform, certainly. So not across local government, but local government at the region level to share economies, so partnership license. And they're going to challenge people as to how effective that is. I think that's one growth area that we can expect.
David Wild at Essex makes the very fair point that a lot of the stuff that we talk about in central government isn't necessarily applicable to local government in terms of infrastructure. I mean, he makes the simple point that in deepest, darkest Essex you can't get a 3G signal, never mind super fast broadband, whereas that's not really the case in a sort of an urban conurbation like Brighton or obviously in central government. How much do we need to start looking beyond the cloud into fixing local infrastructure in the first instance before we start talking about layering on cloud services?
not really sure I'm qualified as a buyer to actually answer that question, but I think that there are other initiatives that are supposed to be addressing that. BD UK, for example, and a lot of that sort of stuff that's going through. Yeah.
I mean, I can't get super fast broadband round the corner from Brighton Town Hall, so you know.
You're not the only one.
I entirely sympathise with David's point of view. I mean, are we approaching this in the right way? There's an awful lot of emphasis put on you should be looking at cloud, but at the same time, a lot of the messages coming out of central government now are you should be looking at digital, of which cloud is merely a subset. Is that a more, do you think, a more attractive message to local government to be thinking about digital? That sounds a bit more mobile apps and sexy and...
Yeah, I think the digital by default message is down to local government now, and they're looking at how they move transaction services. They've been doing that for a while, trying to take out the visits to the office out of the process because, whether you're in business or you're infirm and at home, restricted. They're trying to find ways of engaging people. There are programs way beyond my reach where they're trying to get people connected. I think from our point of view, what we're seeing is people no longer expect to go to an office to work or go to the council office to register a complaint or or actually watch TV at home. I can do it on my iPad now. So the cloud is actually changing the way people think about things. You've only got to go into a tube station now and there'll be a cloud poster from someone. It's a new mentality. I now stream music from a music streaming service onto a Wi-Fi speaker. I used to own discs. It changes life on how you do these things. So, I think that's becoming compelling for a lot of people. And yes, there are some disadvantages still, but that's smaller. That's less disadvantages than the number of people that actually have to go to the office every day just because it's the only physical place they can do work.
One of the points at which my sort of year-long stalking of Tony Singleton this year was when he turned up at SoccerSim this year, the SoccerSim conference up in Manchester, and they've been obviously having cloud sessions at SoccerSim for many years now, but this was the first time it really filled the room. It struck me that it was a big room, there was a big audience, there was a lot of interest. There was also a lot of negativity still. I mean, all the questions that were asked were objections. They weren't positive. How can I do this? What do we need to do to combat that? I mean, Tony's trudging around the country doing these regional events with Tech UK. That's all great, and that's taking the message out there. But there's a lot to be done still, isn't there?
Sorry. I mean, I would say from the GDS point of view, they facilitate buy events. They facilitate supply events, but they don't facilitate the two together on some of the things that they want to do. They've got to do a little bit of marriage brokering here. And, I know Think Cloud obviously run commercial events, but there's lots of little subject areas, whether it be CRM or things they could really focus down or SIAM or whatever it is, and get you guys involved on your areas of expertise. These thematic sessions need to be held. And yes, they're going to be competitive, but isn't that a great idea to understand the art of the possible and the various options people have in a pre-market engagement sense?
No, I agree, and I think that Crown Commercial Services have a responsible role to play as well, to help educate the buyer. I spend a lot of time on consultancy engagements, not just with Brighton, just actually running first G-Cloud engagements, and you kind of got two kinds of buyers. There's the ones that see their workload, and when they actually run their first G-Cloud engagement and actually buy off of it, and the light goes on, and they see their workload just come down like that, or then you get the other buyer who goes, because they're measured by, they measure themselves as successful by the number of OJUs that they manage. Yeah, and that's the engagement and the type of buyers that you're having to deal with, specifically in the markets that I work in. But it's an absolute joy to see, those lights go on when you see that it's that easy. I did a platform as a service engagement over Skype. It took 20 minutes, and they had their purchase order for £80,000 worth of platform as a service. This was for a county council that is tied into a buying consortia where they're told that they have to mandatorily buy for this buying consortia. The savings absolutely stripped apart the amount of money they would have got back by being through that buying consortia. Therefore, business case is done.
Okay, does anyone have any questions from the floor? Does anyone have any comments from the floor? One at the back, hold a second.
Thanks, guys. I just wanted to pick up on one contradiction that you guys kind of raised, which was the catalog approach of the G-Cloud encourages vendors to be quite product-centric, you know, to list your product in a very, here's specifically what it does, it's within a specific category, but then you describe it's not necessarily the best way to approach the buyers. You know, you want them to be more consultative and say, you know, I've identified these areas of your organization that could be transformed. Is that you know, a contradiction or simply just a marketing challenge for vendors? How would they kind of navigate those two different opposing trends? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we are a cloud commodity, and in your service description you can give some examples, but I think we do a lot of that traditionally through our own website and content that we put on there. So whether it's collaborative procurement or how to use it for business file share, or whatever the use case is, gateway reviews or communities of interest, that policy reviews, the things that they will understand, so that they actually are finding you on your website where you've got a lot more rich information you can update on a frequent basis, your free trial is there, all those sorts of things that are there. And then if they feel that's right, they'll say, right, what's the order process? And they go and find you. We do have people finding us on the Cloud Store. I know someone says they won't, they do find us. I think we had one small advantage, is that we were Pan Government accredited, so that created a fairly short list on collaboration software, so we're often on people's short lists for them to evaluate. But I think you've got to look at the wealth of your sort of digital media that you're providing out there, and hope people, or no, hope you promote it so that people can find it and find out how you fit with what their particular business challenge and pain is.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying about the difference between having the product listing and then the service that you're actually trying to sell. But that's surely just you know, you've got the product there, and then you're actually in your selling to your end user organisation, you're actually just taking that knowledge that you have about that end user and applying that to them. So you can have just a generic product on there, and then it can be applied to your end user organisation. You know, unless you have a specific local government or central government product that's doing a specific, meeting a specific need, then keep it as general as possible.
I'll just say one thing: be careful not to over-complex it as well. You know, I go to the Cloud Store and look at some of my competitors, and they package it for this and they package for that. Now, if you fit between those, you'll get really confused which one you need. See, someone's not going to order if they don't understand it. And I know some of the, I know there's a guy from Microsoft, some of the partners that sell some of the Microsoft components, which cows and stuff do I need? They're trying to work that out. And if it gets too difficult, they'll push it aside and go to the simple stuff. Oh, £3 per user per month. Tick. You know, it's got to be simple to make a quick decision.
Okay, so we're going to break for coffee in just a moment, but just before I go, just one last question, I think probably for John more than for Chris, but we talked a lot today about the responsibility of GDS and what they're doing. Is Soccertim doing enough in this front when it comes to local government uptake?
Well, the big answer, no. As I say, I've been to a couple of conferences, and I thought they were effective, you know, meeting the right audience. I just felt the people I was meeting with weren't the business owners with the problems. They were people who actually were creating the barriers. And as you said, I think Soccertim have been a political barrier to a lot of this. I don't think they've done enough to promote the benefits of the cloud. And there's lots of individual local authorities now going out and saying some very good cloud stories. I think they've really got to shake up and say, you know, this is policy now, and we've really got to push this.